On the topic of brake servos, I mentioned earlier that I had a Renault Kangoo Clio brake servo master cylinder in the Scirocco, which I intend on fitting to the Golf. I'm going to share a little bit of information now on what I found. The current one we're looking at here is a Volkswagen one. We get a bit of focus there. And there you can see the part number is 192612105C. And this is off a Mark II Golf 16 valve servo. So that's the car it came out of. I'm assuming it's the original one. I can't be 100% sure, hence the part number there. So in diameter, let's get the measuring tape out here. This guy is, we're going to call it 9 inches just to be kind of there, or in the millimeters, kind of we're talking 240 really, or thereabouts, very close to 240 millimeters in diameter. So I said in my video with regards to the Scirocco that I had fitted a 0506 or a 0405, I can't remember exactly, but in around that year there of servo and master cylinder from a Renault Kangoo van. And so I purchased one of these off eBay. In use condition, they're very cheap. I suppose in my experience of purchasing servos, not that I've purchased that many of them, if you see servos with rust around this area here, what it is a good indicator of is that the master cylinder has failed and that the vacuum from the engine is pulling the brake fluid back out through the back seal into the servo. The servo then fills up with brake fluid gradually, and it starts weeping out here then and running down the front of the servo, causing it to rot. Of course, that brake fluid is inside in the servo as well, and it will lift the paint off the inside of the servo. If it remains full of fluid, it doesn't really seem to have a detrimental effect on it, as long as it doesn't actually fill completely. Then you won't be able to press your brakes. But that's unlikely to happen, as the fluid would start getting drawn out this pipe here into the engine, and not sure what sort of havoc that would cause. But I've seen quite a few of these if you look on eBay for sale, and this guy here is all rusted down here. I wouldn't touch them with a barge pole. So you're looking for something nice and clean like this one. You'll probably find really cheap ones like for 20 and 30 pounds on eBay, and all rust along the front, and maybe a slightly better one like this one here cost an extra like 10 pounds. I think it was like 40 pounds delivered. So that's roughly less than 50 euros for the complete unit, which you can't argue is bad value. Now, the problem I have with this one is, and because I had the wrong model, which the scrapper told me that this was from, the one I had before was from a 0506 Kangoo. Unless these models differ vastly, you can see here this one is again the 9 inches, and we're talking somewhere in around the 230, 240 millimeters in diameter. Out of curiosity, the bolt holes here, and comparing it to the 16 valve one, are roughly 16 millimeters with a measuring tape, 60 mil between centers with a measuring tape. So they are both the same that way. They are both the same diameter. What's a little bit different on them is the clevis fork in the rear, whereas the Volkswagen one has threads and is adjustable. 4 bolts here, which curiously are the same pattern here. This guy, the fork, I can't see threads in it. Now, I'm not going ripping it up or anything, but I can't see no way of adjusting this guy. That's obvious to me anyway. Out of curiosity, again, this bolt pattern here is the very same as the unit from the Mark II Golf. Now, this brand here is ATE, and this is a Bosch unit. And I'm going to try and focus in here now on the part number. And the part number here is a Bosch unit, and it is 82000911050. And I did a search online here on the net, and this particular unit that came from the Kangoo is very common across a lot of cars of that era in diameter. So I suppose it's a handy thing to know if you were looking for a brake servo, maybe for a Mark II Golf 16 valve that maybe was hard to source. I haven't never looked for one of these. I don't know for sure. This unit looks like it probably is a direct swap, not too far away from it. This is from a Renault Kangoo, and I think the chassis code is K9K704, and I think this is the engine code. I'm not too well up on the Reynolds, and that's K0 or KC0/1, and that's 1.5 DCI. There's also a petrol version of this car. I think it's 1.2, maybe 1.4. I'm not sure if the servos are the same in them or not. I expect they probably are. Like I was saying there, this guy is not going to work for me. So I did manage to find this guy here, which I think you can see from the photographs is substantially different. And this is a new old stock one. And this one came from a Peugeot 106 or a Citroen Saxo. And it's 180 millimeters in diameter, or 7.5 inches, or pretty close to 7.5. It won't be exactly 7.5. And it's a Bendex unit. And this one here is B358719. I'm not sure what the R3.00 stands for. It may be something to do with the diameter of some of the pins. The master cylinders, from what I can see, this dimension is the same. Again, it's up on 60 millimeters with a measuring tape. The new old stock unit came with a new valve here for stopping the servo bleeding out. It's also got 4 bolts, which curiously again are the same pattern as the other units, and it's got the fork just like the other Renault unit there. I don't see any way of adjusting this. It seems to be just fixed there somehow. I haven't really looked yet, I suppose. So I got this unit was a new old stock one from a Peugeot dealer in the UK. A guy, he has an eBay shop there, and he seems to sell these. I won't say all the time, but it seems to be something common enough. I know for a fact that the early Renault Clios had a slightly smaller servo than this again. So we're talking about the Mark I Clio. That is the pre-plastic wing one. So the very early Clios, they had a servo which was a ½ inch smaller than it. They were 7 inches in diameter. Now to look at the two, the ½ inch, which is 12.7 millimeters, you might say it's a nice bit, but that is in diameter. So that's like 6 millimeters a side. So it's like less than the width of my finger would be the difference all round. So they're very, very, very similar. And they're worth hunting down as well if you're going to try and do maybe a swap like this. Of course, the reason you need the small servo is, I'll show us now. So back in the engine bay of the Golf. See if we can focus in here a little bit. Let's get myself a better camera, I think. This is playing havoc with the old focus. So if we were to look here at a 9-inch servo, halfway in 9 is 4.5 inches. So if I put my measuring tape here to the middle of that hole where the pedals come out in 4.5 inches, you can straight away see that there is quite a problem over here. So this is effectively the wheel well in here. The chassis leg is here. Now, the chassis leg ends here. It doesn't continue into the car from here. The structural point of the car from here, from a suspension point of view, is really down around this area here. And this framing goes back under the car a little bit, and of course goes from left to right in the car. This piece here is really down for kind of like I'm going to call it the front chassis leg, but it's kind of like a crumple zone. And of course it also supports the strut tower here, but it ends here. So that would be a 9-inch servo, so that would be quite a common servo, but you can see straight away that's the problem. So if I pull it back here to 3.5, which would be 7 inches, you can see here that I actually have room for my measuring tape here now. Now there is a small fettle required here, so a fella can get funky with a bit of a hammer, or I think it's probably just better. What I did with the Sirocco was I just ran the grinding disc, just cut that down there and made a slit up here in this area, down here in this area, and I just tapped that metal in and rejoined it back up with another piece. So I kind of made a little step into it, and I'll show that in a video anyway when I'm cutting this guy, what I do. And I made a cardboard template for here to make the piece for this area here, which we will be keeping the same center point here. So the steering wheel inside in the car and the brake pedal and all that all stay in the same place. So there's no movement by that kind of stuff there. So I've got my cardboard cut out, roughly done now. So what I have here is somewhat around 50-55 millimeters. That's just a guesstimate, really doesn't have to be that. So I've got a piece taped all around, and you can see there I've allowed some clearance for the servo. Most of this stuff is, once you start putting it into the car, this is all going to be cut in metal obviously, but a lot of this is going to actually be cut away and won't be used at all. So what I've done here in a minute, I've just held it in the vise here, and in the bottom, of course, after you put the 52 or 3 mil hole that you need at the bottom, I just stuck the bolts through here. So now I've got a couple of holes that I'll clean up maybe a little bit, and I'll be able to use the center here, this round portion here, as a center for where the brake servo would have sat if there was one fitted into the car, if you mean the Mark 1 Golf. So this is where the linkage comes through the bulkhead from the pedal out into the framing that connected up with the brake servo on the left hand side of the car. So I'm going to offer this up next, and it's going to show me roughly where I'm going to have to start cutting, so I can mark around. I mean, this is not perfect by any means or anything like that, but like I say, this is just a rough idea of where I'm going to be starting off from, and I'll work from there then. Back out in the engine bay, I've cut myself a second circle, and this is a kind of a reference circle really. So you can see here where my 4 holes are, and what I did there was basically I have a heavy plate on my bench, just a piece of steel plate. Put up a piece of cardboard, 10 mil socket, hit the socket a whack of a hammer, it just goes through the cardboard, and you get cleaner holes. So this mimics the other piece of cardboard I've cut. And what I've done with this guy as well is I have it cut so this guy here is up against the rain tray. I have a piece of tape here at my center line. I know then as well it's 110 mil to the center of the hole here. So that once I start cutting the car here, I'm not 100% sure exactly yet exactly how much I'm going to cut off. I know it's going to be from this section down, but I'm not sure if I'm going to cut up either. So this disc is really a reference, so that when I go, if I lose my location due to the cutting in the car, I can always offer this disc back up again, and it will guide me to where I should be. I will have to take the steering column out, I think, when I'm doing the cutting. I'll try and leave it in initially, and I'm just going to put some metal on the far side of the bulkhead there, so in where your feet will be, some light tin metal. And the idea of that, of course, is when I'm cutting through that the sparks aren't flying in all over the car, that the piece of metal catches the sparks, maybe puts them down to the ground. I don't have any carpet in the car, so I don't have the risk of burning the car, I think. We'll see how that works out. So it's chopping time. So I started cutting the car. All going back now. This is the first piece to cut out. So it's a bit of a cobble, I guess, just kind of chop your way around. So this is part of the firewall, the piece I had taped up we were looking at, and I kind of started off midway through the circle that I'm going to cut out for the piece of metal. I cut out a piece of the upper chassis leg as well there, just said I'd just show for curiosity. It's nice to see after this car is 83, so 30 odd years, and the wax is still inside in the car. The metal is absolutely perfect. Nice to see. So that is something I'll be kind of making back up again myself and welding back in when this piece comes out. And the reason that piece has to come out is I'll just kind of show you here now. So I have the servo just kind of left in there now at the minute. So you can see the section where the light is coming through here. The piece I've cut at the minute. This guy's just hanging in on the hole, it's not connected up to anything. The piece of the chassis leg piece here, we'll say, this is the piece that's got to be cut to allow the servo to fit back in. So I cut that piece, and there's 3 spot welds on the top, I think 3 along the bottom and 2 on the bottom of the piece. And I just kind of drilled and kind of hacked away at those guys there and got them out of the way, so I could knock that piece off, and I'll just make up my own piece for that when I'm finished. This is not sitting in its home position just yet. It's just kind of, I'm putting it in just to kind of size up where I'm going. It is pushed up against the flat of the metal of the car here, so the bulkhead, but I'm going to continue cutting this circle out, maybe up about as far as here where my finger is, about as far as there, and that is where I'm going to have the material flat down then, flat so that this is, we'll say, parallel with the ground, so we'll say to get that way. So I've started trimming up my piece of metal. So this is the piece of metal, it's 1mm mild steel. So I've got my 4 holes drilled for the servo, and I've just got a small hole drilled here. I'm getting ready now to hole saw, and I'm going to put a bigger hole in here to allow the servo to fit in and out. And this then is basically, this circle is going to be mimicking, or it's the real version of this guy here. Now, like I said earlier, a lot of the material around the edges here is going to be trimmed off. That's the 50mm piece. A lot of that's going to be trimmed down to almost nothing at all. And it's really at the bottom and the sides where this is going to play its part in making it a nice strong, when it's welded in, to make it really, really strong. So it doesn't be flexing or anything like that. So I'll continue on drilling and cutting and see where we go from there. I've started welding my disc back in now, and you can see when I mentioned earlier about the 50mm piece stuck to my carbon template, how a lot of it gets trimmed off. You can see, actually, I would say probably 70% of it gets trimmed off and not required. So I'm at the stage now where I'm filling in this section here, and if I remove this piece of cardboard here, you can see into the car. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have a slight fall of ground from here out to the edge here, and the idea of that is if rain or something gets in from, because the drain is over here, we'll say coming down from the scuttle panel or the rain tray, the water runs down along here, back down to the chassis like here, but of course there's nothing to stop some of the water running in here and building up in there, so I don't want the water welling up inside here. So I'm going to, this is going to be a slight fall from here to here, so I've cut an extra piece out of here just to create that fall. So the next job now is to basically cut the carbon template cut, and I'm going to cut that piece out of a piece of 1mm sheet and start folding it around there and start tacking it into place, and take it from there. So we're on the recovery now at this stage. The servo fits in nice and neat, just pops back in. It's really cool. I drilled a 65 or so mil hole here. I mean, you could drill a 52 to make it an exact fit for the servo, but you're making life awkward in for getting the servo in and out. Now, it's not that you're going to be changing the servo every day anyway, so it's purely just for reassembly once I get all this ground down and the welds cleaned up and painted and all that kind of good stuff. So here now I'm going to transfer my cardboard cutout onto a piece of metal. When I was shaping the piece of cardboard around and trimming it off, you would assume that the back edge here would be flat, but it's actually not. You can see from my cardboard cutout here, it's quite a curve, and of course that's because I'm radiusing this guy up around, and while I'm radiusing it, this guy is going to be tipped slightly like that. So the shape that I'm cutting out is this sort of a shape here. So I'm just using a pin there just to mark out the piece of metal. And I'm just going to use this guy here now to kind of initially kind of chop my way around it, and then I'm going to shape it up with the grinder and the grinding wheel in it. Of course, by getting this shape close like this, would say it's maybe, I imagine I'll have to do a little bit of tipping around with the grinder over, I would say, on sight in the engine bay. But by having it pretty close to what you need, it saves an awful lot of grinding in around there. I mean, when you're grinding in around there, the sparks are going everywhere, and including into the inside of the car. So what I have at the back of it is I've got a metal box that I just had made up many years ago. It was for a different job completely. So it's like an oil drain tray or something, and I have that laid in at the inside of where your feet go, and so that box definitely will collect a lot of the sparks and all that, but still, to prevent it going up into the back of the dash, the less grinding you do on site, the better. So the idea is that this guy should just be folded, rolled into shape, and then just welded up in around there, and the welds just kind of ground down afterwards and should be done. So this is the metal box that I use for work like this. It's just there's nothing, it just happens to be this size. So what I use this, it's basically hollow. There's just a tray. You can use it for draining oil one day and something else another day. So what I do is I place this guy kind of up against the video clip here now, but I'm placing it up into. Sorry, hard to video it. I'm placing it up into the wiring at the back of it, up into the footwell. So you can kind of see the top of the box up this area here where my welding is. So what I do there is I just use pieces of box metal, and I'd prop it up. Some more there now, and the idea is, of course, to catch as much sparks as possible that when you're grinding inside in the car, because all that stuff is gone up into the air vents and up under the bottom of the dash. And of course, when you're welding cars, there is a big problem with potentially burning the car, which is not ideal. Well, I've got my disc welded into place. I've done some initial cleaning up of the welds, so I've run them down with a quick run of a grinding disc around here, and then a bit of a flappy wheel guide just to get all the sharp edges out of it. Of course, you don't want to grind all the weld off completely all over the place, that you're actually left with nothing holding the piece in. This all sounds like one piece of the bulkhead now, so I'm very happy with that. The other thing, of course, is my center line is the center line, and my 110mm is back at 110mm. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do an awkward bit now, is to go inside the inside of the car and run welds at the backs of these guys here, where the disc is jointed the bulkhead of the car, just to make double sure that I haven't weakened the welds too much, or this might ever crack or anything like that. I don't want any of that kind of stuff happening. So I'm going to run a weld probably around this area here, in around here, and if I can get to these areas at the front there, if I can, it's unlikely to put some weld, but I get something in around somewhere anyway. But the drain guy here is, as mentioned earlier, so this is falling away from the car now, so if water was to come down here, it's not going to well up in this area here. It's going to run off out here and off down to like the chassis area of the car, like it would if it was standard, I guess. So progress is coming on well. Happy enough with this now, and we'll drive on from there.